Welcome to This is Baseball. I'm Brandon Johnson. Thank you for tuning in today. If you've been here a long time, thank you for coming back. If you're new, thank you for checking the show out. I hope that you like it and decide to stick around. So today, I want to get into what I'm calling the state of baseball. And as I was putting this together, I kind of wanted to look at like the last 10 years of baseball because there have been a lot of changes that have happened in MLB. And as I was kind of putting the show together, I learned that Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, has been the commissioner for 10 years now. So this episode is really fitting today because I think it's really going to be kind of a breakdown of everything that he's done, both good and bad. But I'm really excited to get into it because a lot has changed, and, in my opinion, most of it for the better. So some of the things I'm going to be focusing on today in this episode, as far as rule changes go, I want to talk about the intentional walk rule, the pitch clock, disengagement rule, the bigger bases, the ghost runner in extra inning, universal DH, the balanced schedule, and playoff expansion. I'm also going to touch a little bit on his handling of Rob Manfred's handling of the Houston Astros. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that because I think that it's, that's its own episode. But I do want to kind of give my piece of, what I think he could have done and should have done differently just in this episode. But let's go ahead and get into it. So one of the first things that happened with Rob Manfred when he became commissioner was it was very clear to him that baseball needed some changes, right? Ratings were down, attendance was down, the games were too long. He realized that baseball had a pace of play issue. There was a lot of just nothing happening, a lot of unnecessary breaks in between pitches, and just a lot of a lack of action is kind of what he was looking at. How do I make Major League Baseball games shorter? And I think that's a pretty bold mindset to have as the commissioner of baseball, because baseball has been largely known as, the sport that doesn't have a game clock. There is no clock. You play 9 innings of baseball, right? That could be done in 2 hours. That could be done in 5 hours. It doesn't matter. It's about getting 27 outs, and there's no rush to get there. And, maybe 15, 20 years ago, that was fine. But in today's day and age, when there's just so much entertainment available for consumers, you have to kind of look at your product and go, man, people are tuning out of baseball. What do we need to do to get people to buy back in? And the just slam dunk obvious answer was find a way to make games shorter. Games on average were well over 3 hours a pop, and that is honestly a lot of time to dedicate to a sporting event, especially when you have a sport in baseball, Major League Baseball, that has 162 games in its schedule. That's a hard number of games to dedicate to watching night in and night out. Like, realistically, nobody has time to do that. Like, you're going to sit down every night of the week for 3 hours minimum and watch baseball. No, like, nobody's doing that. There's just too much stuff to do for people, and that was Rob Manfred's thing. Like, we got to get people invested. So, you look at other sports with NFL, that it's going to be about 3 hours. With basketball games, it's going to be 2.5-ish hours, and that time and time again about how much time you need to dedicate. With baseball, it was always this unknown. Now, when you're at a baseball stadium, I don't think you really care about how long you're there because it's an event for you. You plan to do it. But if you're, just sitting at home in front of the TV, and for me, somebody that loves baseball and will watch whatever. Like, there's been times where I'm watching a game and, it's the 7th inning and we're already at the 3-hour mark. And I'm like, we got 3 innings to go or 2.5 innings to go here. And that's a long time to dedicate to just watching baseball. So that's my long way of saying Rob Manfred's goal was to speed up pace of play and shorten baseball games. So let's dive into some of these rules. So one of the first things Manfred did was change the intentional walk rule, right? If you want to walk a player intentionally, you would have to throw the 4 pitches, waste 2 minutes of everybody's time to tell this player we don't want to pitch to you. You just need to go to first base. And for me, when it happened, because the new rule is if you don't want to pitch to a player, the manager just throws up a 4 and umpire just says, take your base. And, you just eliminate a lot of wasted time by just sending them down to first base. And for me, I was like, okay, how often does this even happen? Like, you're talking about 90 seconds to 2 minutes of time each game, maybe not even each game, because an intentional walk isn't going to happen every game. So I thought it was a little bit silly, but I was like, okay, whatever. I know a lot of people were upset about the kind of 1 in a million chance of, well, what if the pitcher throws a wild pitch and there's a runner on third and, the opposing team ties or walks off because of that wild pitch? And that's happened before. Is it going to happen? Odds are no, but that reason, that excitement or potential excitement isn't enough to keep that rule. And now that we're like 9 or 10 years into this rule and nobody thinks about, oh man, I really missed the intentional walk. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think Manfred started with this rule because this was kind of the safe, like, I'm going to just get my toes wet and see kind of what we can do with these rules. And that was an easy place to start. And I think it overall went pretty well. So the next rule I want to discuss is the disengagement rule. So this rule was put in place, and basically this is a pitcher can only throw or try to pick off a player 3 times, right? They can't just like keep throwing over to first base over and over again, trying to stall to get their bullpen ready or whatever. This is a pace of play rule that was put into place and has been honestly really good for the game because obviously it keeps the game moving, but it also has increased stolen bases. You have players that, oh, he's thrown over twice to me. He's not going to throw over me. He's not going to throw over to me again, because if you throw over 3 times and you're unsuccessful on the 3rd time, then the player at first base or whatever base they're throwing to gets awarded the next base. It's essentially like a balk. And overall, like for me, the idea of just not wasting time is good for the game of baseball, because the theme is a lot of time is wasted in a baseball game. The next rule I want to discuss is the bigger bases. So Major League Baseball made the bases bigger. There was this big hoopla from the fans of, well, now the bases aren't actually 90 feet apart. And honestly, this rule was done to decrease injuries and collisions on the base paths, and this has helped tremendously. From 21 to 22, there was a 13% decrease on injuries around the base paths because of this change. So anything that is done for the sake of player safety is all right with me. So little change. There was a little bit of outrage for, just because people don't like change and they just want to gripe about something, but this was good, and there's really nothing more to say about that. So here's a rule I don't like that is annoying, but it's going to pain me to say that I get why they do it. So the ghost runner at second base during extra innings. before this was implemented, if you went to extra innings, you just kept playing until somebody won the game, right? And you would have, 14, 15, 16 plus inning games. And you would have, to use a lot of pitching in that game. And that would kind of water down the product for the next game, because then you have a tired bullpen, a tired pitching staff, and you have a starter that you're like, hey, man, we really need you to go deep into the game because we played 17 innings last night on May 17th, and this is the second game of a large stretch of games in a row. So this rule was done mostly, the Ghost Runner rule was done mostly to save pitching staffs and just try to get these games over with, right? And again, I don't like it just because I like the, traditional baseball way of just playing the game out normally until it wins. I like the idea of free baseball, as they say, once you get to the 10th inning. But I get this just for the sake of saving teams' bullpens and ultimately helping player safety, probably minimizing injuries by having this done, where you're not having to stretch pitchers and overwork pitchers over periods of time because you're playing deep into the night in extra innings. So here's arguably the biggest rule change that Rob Manfred has put into place for Major League Baseball. This is the pitch clock. This, as I said earlier in the episode, baseball was always known for, it doesn't have a clock. The game just ends when it ends. Could be 2 hours, could be 5 hours, or somewhere in between. And Manfred and co. knew, like, okay, we can't just be having 4.5 hour games. We can't be having 3.5 hour average games, whatever. Like, we got to do something. And what's the biggest problem of pace of play, or why are these games so long? And it is, there's just a lot of nothing happening in between pitches. Like, it could be 45 seconds to a minute in between every pitch. So you have at bats that are taking, 3, 4, 5 minutes that should have taken all of 90 seconds because we're just kind of dilly-dallying around. And I love this rule. I loved it when they announced it. I know that, this was also kind of a huge deal for the, baseball traditionalists of, well, I'm not going to watch. This isn't even the same product anymore. But I have always been under the idea of, if you were a batter, you bat 3 to 5 times a game, right? You have 3 to 5 plate appearances a game. You should be ready to go. There shouldn't be this, I'm going to get in the box, take a pitch, get out, adjust my gloves, adjust my elbow pad, kick some dirt, do all of the things, do all of the routines and rituals and superstitions that baseball players do. And I get that, but you're wasting a lot of time. Like, you got to keep the game going. So this was done, I think, for the pitcher and the hitter to get this done, because you have pitchers that, work slow or work fast. And for the pitchers that work slow, where they just kind of, they throw a pitch, hang out on the outside of the mound, rub the ball a little bit, get some rosin, do all this stuff, waste a bunch of time. Then before you know it, it's midnight and it's the 8th inning because nobody's in any sort of hurry. So pitch clock comes in and lowers game times on average by about 20 to 30 minutes. And in fact, in 2022, games averaged just over 3 hours per game. And it had been that way since about 2016. Games were over 3 hours. And in 2023 and 2024, games have been, in 2023, 2 hours, 39 minutes. In 2024, 2 hours, 36 minutes. So you're able to go to the game and go, all right. Or if you're watching a game, go, okay, I need to invest about 2.5 hours into this, which is significantly better than 3+ hours. When you're thinking about it this way, if it's a Wednesday night or a school night in general, you want to take your kids out to the game. Well, if I'm going to be there till 10:30 and be home by 11:15, whatever. Like that's a late night and early morning for the family. So, you cut half an hour off of that, and just that half an hour can do wonders for you. So it's a great move, and knowing that, okay, game's going to be about 2.5 hours, that has actually increased attendance and viewership because games are shorter and people are able to stay engaged for, less time, obviously, but I think there's more quality in the time that is decreased. So it's a huge win overall, and I have a very hard time finding any reason that this is a bad move. Moving on to another rule, another kind of controversial rule that came into play, one that's been talked about for, I feel like, forever, and this is the implementation of the universal DH. So, as you know, for years and years and years, American League has had a DH and the National League has not had a DH, meaning that the National League ballparks have their pitcher hitting in their lineup. And to me, I always loved the strategy behind National League games as far as how do we utilize pitchers? When do we take out pitchers? When do we have a double switch? And just having to really play chess with your pitching staff. However, most of the time, your pitcher was just an automatic out. And I think that is a huge negative. It can be a rally killer. You have let's say it's the third inning and you've got a big kind of rally moving and your pitcher comes up with 2 outs. It's a little early. It's too early to take your pitcher out. But you really want to keep this rally going. So now you have to kind of weigh that, and you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons of it and make a decision that could be good or could be bad. So they added the DH to the National League, and I think this is great because now both the NL and the AL are playing by the same set of rules, and I think you get better quality at bats from players that are going to be in the lineup every day. You're going to extend the careers of players that are kind of on the back end of their career that, maybe they don't really have it in the field anymore, but they can still swing the bat okay. So now you can, move a guy that's been a career first baseman that's just not good out there anymore. You can take him off of first base, and now he's your DH, and can still be productive for a few years for you. So better offense, more careers, or longer careers for certain players, and I think it's good. Now let's talk 3-batter minimum. What's the 3-batter minimum? A pitcher that gets brought in out of the bullpen has to face at least 3 batters unless the inning ends. So what does that mean? Before, you had, these pitchers that were specialists. You had the lefty 1-out guys. They could come in and, have a lefty-lefty matchup, and they might throw 1 pitch, and then they're done. So you bring that guy in. You have a 2-minute commercial break. He comes in. He throws 1 to 5 pitches. Then you say thank you. Then you take him out. Then you go back to the commercial break. And before you know it, you've watched 4 to 5 minutes of commercials, and you've seen 90 seconds of action. And this was something that was just getting out of hand with the utilization of pitchers. And I think it's a good move. I think if you're a pitcher in Major League Baseball, you should be able to handle, pitching to at least 3 batters. If you're a guy that, I hate to say it, but if you're a guy that's that loogie, that specialist, honestly, I think you're wasting a roster spot. I think you're just kind of in the way, and I would say that I don't think that holds a lot of value. I think you're taking the roster spot of somebody that's better than you. So I like this. Utilize the pitchers and kind of, in my opinion, maximize your roster. So Good move, good rule. Now, moving on to the balanced schedule. So, if you remember for years, like interleague play was always this big thing. Interleague play was in June. American League teams would play National League teams. There were 16 National League teams, 14 American League teams. Then they made the switch where Houston moved from the NL to the AL, and there were 15 teams in each league, which meant that interleague play couldn't be just put into 1 month. Interleague play had to be all year. And that was good because the league was balanced as far as teams. You had an American League West at one point that had 4 teams, and you had a National League Central that had 6 teams. That's no good when every other division has 5 teams. So that was a good change. But with that schedule, what you had was, all AL teams would play each other, but then you would play, 1 year the American League Central. Just for example, the AL Central would play the NL Central. And then the following year, they would have the NL West on their schedule. Then the following year, they'd have the NL East, and so on and so forth. So you would have it to where, the Royals, for instance, Royals fans had one chance every 3 years, essentially, to see Bryce Harper play for the Nationals. And I think in a game of baseball where you have a lot of stars and you have fans that want to see those stars, they shouldn't have to wait 3 years or even longer than that to see these players. So now every team plays every team. You're going to have, if you, like, to stay with the example, the Royals will have the other 29 teams on their schedule somewhere along the way. And that's good because now, the Royals can see Bryce Harper every year, or they can see Shohei Ohtani every year. Now, it might not be at home, but you can at least watch 2 to 3 games of a team that you don't typically get to see, or a player that you don't typically get to see. So I think that is good, and I think it's going to kind of help, it says it right in the name, balance out the schedule, where I think you're going to see less just complete domination from teams over their divisions because you're playing within your division less. So, you're beating up on bad teams less than you typically would, or you at least have less opportunity to do so with playing your division less and playing the rest of the league more. So I loved that rule. I think it's something that they should have done a long time ago. I'm glad that they did it. Final kind of rule change that I want to talk about before we get out of here is postseason expansion. Now, I am for postseason expansion. I think when you have the league set up the way that it is, where there's not a salary cap and doesn't look like there's ever going to be, you need to find a way to kind of give everybody a better opportunity to make the postseason. And along with that, you have a very long season. Like I said, you have 162 games in the schedule. It's no good if you feel like your team's out of it by June, you now have 3 months on your schedule where nobody is tuned into your baseball team because they don't have a shot. So they went from 5 teams in each league to 6 teams in each league make the playoffs. And it's already been, in my opinion, a huge hit. We're 3 years into this format, and it's made those kind of wild card races a lot more interesting down the stretch. It's made, more fan bases have excitement for their team longer. Maybe instead of tuning out in July, you tune out in August because you're in it a little bit longer. Now, I think that's good. I think the more engagement you can have from your fan base, or the longer you can have engagement from your fan base, the better it is for the sport. And I don't think that they should get crazy with postseason expansion. I think 6 on each league is a good number. You don't want to do something like NBA where they have, 8 seeds in each conference, but they have 10 teams that kind of make it, and they have the play-in tournament, and their regular season in NBA is basically pointless because 2/3 of the league, kind of make the playoffs in NBA, and I don't want that to happen. Like I said, I like the postseason expansion. I think at some point along the way, we'll do kind of a bigger breakdown of this postseason expansion and see what works, what doesn't work, kind of look at some of the data there, see if there's something that needs to change or if there is anything that they can change to make it better. But like I said, that's a time for a different episode. Now, overall, I have liked kind of what Rob Manfred has done throughout his time as commissioner. I know a lot of people haven't. A lot of people like to pretend that Rob Manfred hates baseball. He doesn't like the game. He wants to change it. I think he saw a product that needed help and has done drastic things, but necessary things to put the game in a better spot than it was. And he doesn't go without criticism, though. I think there's some things that he did or has done or has thought about doing that people don't like. I think, thinking about how they handled double headers for a couple of years, where double headers were 7 innings instead of 9 innings, and they were shorter, and you had Madison Bumgarner throw a no-hitter, but it wasn't a no-hitter because because the game was only 7 innings. And I think a game is 9 innings. And I'm glad that went away. I think a silly rule that has been kind of floated around is the golden at-bat rule that I don't think is going to go anywhere. Now, what is the golden at-bat rule? It's a rule where at any point in the game, you can bring a player from anywhere in the lineup, even if they just hit, and you can plug them into a big spot. So if you have bases loaded and 1 out and you have your 9-hitter up and you don't want to use your 9-hitter, but you got Shohei Ohtani that you can use, you can throw Shohei Ohtani into that spot, and then he can bat, and then he can just, go back to his regular spot in the lineup. And I think that that's an overall bad idea. I think it's an idea that's not going to go anywhere. And at least I hope it doesn't. I think the whole idea of setting a lineup is strategic. That's just how it works. If you have the bottom of the lineup coming up in a high leverage spot, that's just the way that it goes. You shouldn't be able to be like, you know what? I want to use Shohei Ohtani here instead. Just don't like it. But final thing, and I think one of the more obvious things that Rob Manfred did a terrible job at, and I think he would tell you this, is his handling of the Houston Astros and the sign stealing scandal, which, he basically gave the players immunity to talk and share what was going on and what happened and how did it happen. And I think he should have been harsher on the players. I think that they should have been suspended. I think that obviously the general manager and the manager got let go from the team or had to serve suspensions, but the players who were willingly involved in it didn't have to serve anything. And I think what should have happened is anybody that was on that roster that was knowingly and willingly participating in the cheating scandal should have been suspended for 81 games. They should have treated it the same way that they treat PED suspensions. Hey, you guys cheated, you're going to miss half the season. And I think the Astros should have had to field a minor league baseball team for half a year, and that should have been their punishment. But Rob Manfred just handled that poorly and should have handled that better. I think the one, good thing that came out of it was the PitchCom device, which I haven't gotten into yet. The PitchCom device basically eliminates the possibility of sign stealing scandals happening, because instead of the catcher flashing signs to the pitcher, you have the PitchCom device that somebody just presses a button, fastball, curveball, changeup, whatever, and they communicate that way. But I will say, overall, very happy with where baseball is and where I think baseball is headed. I think a lot of the changes, while maybe didn't get a warm reception at first, a lot of people are into it now. Like I said, I don't think anybody thinks about the intentional walk. I think a lot of people that I talk to have nothing but positive things to say about the pitch clock, which I think is probably the most controversial change. And yeah, I think baseball's in a good spot. So thank you so much for listening today. If you liked the show, give us a rating, give us a review. That helps me tremendously. I will see you next time.